Welcome to the Lion Zone, where you learn to be a lion and not the prey in a world of hungry jackals and vicious wolves. I'm your host, Steve Johan. For more about me, visit stevejohan.com. And you can also find me on Substack under stevejohan.substack.com. I've got another great show lined up for you. Before I introduce my guest, I want to start things out with a song that will set the stage for today, and then we'll see if my guest knows who this is. So here we go. All right, James, who's that?
Sounds sort of like the singer sounds like Rush. The drummer doesn't sound like Neil Peart, so it might be early Rush because when you got to the Tom Sawyer days in the late 80, 79, 80, 81, Neil Peart was a completely different drummer. He was amazing.
He was. Well, you're close. It is a Canadian trio, Triumph, Fight the Good Fight.
And okay.
They were that was off their Allied Forces 1981 album. And basically it just says, don't be discouraged. Don't be afraid. We can make it through another day, make it worth the price we pay. The good book says it's better to give than receive. Do my best to do my part. Nothing in my pockets. I've got nothing up my sleeve. I keep my magic in my heart. And then he goes on and it says, fight the good fight every moment, fight the moment every minute of the day, fight the good fight every moment. It's your only way. And I thought about you, James, because you are a true fighter.
Thank you, Steve. I am. And at least I got the era right, late 70s, early 80s. So 81's good.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that song since I was in college. So kind of dating myself, but it's fascinating.
It is. Well, I want to introduce you. James Grundvig is an author, media host, investigative journalist, father and husband who enjoys the sunny climes of Florida when he's not busy getting the word out and stirring up a hornet's nest. James is the host of Unrestricted Warfare, a show that can be found on Rumble and other assorted outlets. His show stays on top of what is taking place around the world and more. Unlike many shows people who call themselves journalists, James doesn't just parrot the mainstream media, but actually digs deep and gets below the surface to find the real meaning and what's really going on. James isn't afraid to tackle controversial issues when it comes to uncovering the truth and exposing the lies that have been foisted upon us each and every day by would-be governors and master manipulators. James is also an author of several books, including Master Manipulator, the explosive true story of fraud, embezzlement, and betrayal at the CDC, and Breaking Van Gogh. And we'll be talking about those a little later. So, James, before we get into what we're going to discuss, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up, and what eventually led you to what you're doing today?
Hey, I grew up in a small town called Bronxville, New York, in southern Westchester County, above New York City. I'm first generation Norwegian. My father was a farmer in Norway. My mom was born in a shipping dynasty, so I always had the blue collar, white collar in me. So I was never impressed by money, especially the nouveau riche. Look what I have. Like, I could care less. Never competed with the Joneses. None of that stuff interested me. But early on, when I was growing up in my childhood, my mother warned me about communism. My father was reading a new book on Hitler every month, and so he warned me about Nazism, fascism. And sure enough, even my small public school in the town of Bronx by the early 70s had a course on Marxism and communism. And my father got pissed off, went down and confronted the principal and said, "Hey, why are you teaching courses of communism?" Right. So that was kind of my entree into the world we're living in. I went to college to study civil engineering, eventually moved into construction management. But when I was in college, the late Dr. Melvin Goldstein was the dean of English, and he got me interested in Dante's Inferno. We did one semester on hell only. We didn't waste our time with purgatory, not heaven, right? The 33 cantos. And he forced a class of 77 English majors, and I was one of 7 who were not an English major. And I had a kind of a handicap in the sense that my parents spoke half Norwegian, half English at home. And I said, you know what? I was like, this is my last English course in my life. I could like just move on. What happened instead was he planted a seed in me to like, to like really delve into the subject. Well, sin and evil always fits into the Bible. And I'm like, well, let me see what Dante's got to say about it. I was given chapter or canto number 6. And each one of us were given 33 chapters, so some were getting duplicates, but we had to write about the sins in each canto. So
Oh,
I wrote a typical bad paper, like a D paper or whatever, the night before. The next morning I woke up, the class was at 1:30 in the afternoon, and I skipped chemistry lab. Screw this. This is how the seed planted me. And I ripped up the bad paper and I wrote a new paper, turned it in, and 2 weeks go by, and then Dr. Goldstein goes, Mr. Grundvig, you're full of surprises. And I thought I like failed, right? I literally like looked on my left shoulder, looking at the door to like walk out humiliated. The opposite. You wrote the best paper in the class. And I was like
wow.
stunned. And he pulled me aside after class. He says, you're probably not gonna be able to repeat this, because he knew I had some grammar issues, right? Punctuation issues. But I captured the essence of the canto. That was the key. And I start off that envy, jealousy, and avarice were the sins that populated canto number 6, and I went on to explain it and closed it. And we were forced to write one page like a Wall Street Journal op-ed. He didn't want rambling on and on, didn't want footnotes. Just pull out the information and give it as concise as possible. And I did. So it was a great trip. He pulled me aside and said I should go write a journal. Well, I'd go like, journal, like 20 years old. Journal? The hell's that? I know the Wall Street Journal. Well, journal's like your diary. Diary? I'm like, what a boring idea. I mean, I'm a college kid. Well, what, partying, chasing women, right? Going to class. I mean, usual 20-year-old stuff in college. What do I want to write a journal for? Right. But then a seed was planted, and like a month later, I walked through this parking lot in Connecticut to the chemistry class, lab, no less. I went to that one, and I saw a license plate that said VK 1095. And so for me as a Norwegian, I go, well, that's Viking 1095. And I go, well, what are the odds of that license plate being in this parking lot of all the cars in Connecticut? Only this car has that. And it was Dr. Goldstein's seed. It was this thing. And I said, after chemistry, I went across the library and I started researching the Vikings. And 1095 was the first crusade. And the Viking Age, historically speaking, ended in 1066, but not quite. And that got me interested in eschatology, right? The end of a religion, cult, and things of that nature. I got very interested in the Four Horsemen, and it just got me down a path of writing. And I sucked as a writer for my first 5 years, but I was relentless. And eventually I self-educated, took some screenwriting classes, 10 years later, whatever. But it got me to where I needed to go. It also helped me, though, working in the construction management field, because why? I would eventually be involved in change management, meaning here are the plans. Nope, the plans never, the final plans, or built as they call them, never meet the preliminary plans. I would have to be involved in change orders, in claims. I'd have to interview people. I have to write technical reports, all that stuff. So all that writing continued, even though I worked in the construction management field. So when my son became autistic in 2003, it was natural for me in 2005 for the brand new English language, only 1 year old at the time. It was the Epoch Times. Epoch Times, Chinese version of expatriates from China. They started the Chinese language in 2000 or 2001. but the Epoch Times English version started in 2004. And Stephen Gregory, the late Stephen Gregory, passed away a couple of years. Great guy, real passionate about the word. He was a deputy editor at the time. He became my personal editor because he knew as a journalist I wasn't quite there. I had a good enough writing skills, good enough research skills, but I wasn't quite there. And so he brought me along. He eventually became the publisher of the Epoch Times from 2000, I think 13 or 14 to when he passed away in 2022, I believe it was. And it was just a very interesting trip, and I got educated by him. Eventually, I went to the Huffington Post when it was the Huffington Post. I broke stories that the big media couldn't break on the BP oil spill, like for instance that the Obama EPA blocked clean dispersant coming out of Norway because Obama and all the Republicans, the Uniparty, wanted to use this toxic dispersant out of Illinois. Hello, right? That sank the oil. That didn't stop it. And this toxic stuff was banned in Europe for testing. And it just became, it really opened up my eyes. So I began writing for the Huff Post along with the Epoch Times. And I also wrote for the Financial Times, FDI magazines, and many other media journals. And eventually COVID happened. But the good news about COVID is in 2019, I was writing for Dr. Sherry Tenpenny's Vaxxter.com. And we all knew Zeke was complete BS, garbage. It was a complete psyop, but it was a dry run for COVID.
Yep.
So we knew this. We knew Fauci. Fauci led the billions of dollars leaving Congress to fund a Zika vaccine. So we knew all about this. Trump came in and disrupted the plans. So they never finished the Zika vaccine, but they took the money anyways. I guess the military did, or whoever, Fauci and the military, and they used it to weaponize against the people in the COVID vaccines. I can assure you that's where the money went. Went to the biolabs in Ukraine and probably elsewhere. This is where the money went. Stolen from us, supposed to be used for something, never goes back to the budget, weaponized against us. Tenpenny and I were so sure of a pandemic in 2020 that we thought, it's going to be Ebola because Fauci's always talked about Ebola, right? So she reserved the domain name Ebola2020.com in mid-December 2019. That is a fact. You can go on to go check out Ebola2020.com and read the history of that domain name. And the first week, coronavirus happened out of Wuhan, right? And Sherry wanted me she already had the website up like 80%, wanted me to start blogging to it. And I was like, Sherry, I can't. I go, it's not Ebola. We're dealing with coronavirus. It's a whole different animal. And so that website kind of never got launched properly. And I was in New York City at the time for a year and a half. And what happened? We got locked down. And when I heard Cuomo say 15 days flat curve, I said, that's a lie. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right? We're gonna keep certain certain companies open, but we're gonna shut down all the middle class, family-owned restaurants. They went out on attack.
The plan was underfoot.
And then I started to realize by October that, holy crap, I sat my wife down and I said, you want to know what the worst case scenario is for New York City? And it's happening right now. But you want to know what that is? They bring in tons of migrants. They approve, and they have, regulatory wise, quarantine camps, FEMA camps in the state of New York. Right? It's not an act, as they can't do it quite yet, but it just takes one stroke of the pen for them to do this. So you got those two problems. I said, we lived in Manhattan, the Upper East Side. People forget that's an island. It's an island, people. You got the East River, Harlem and East River one side, and you got the wide Hudson River on the other. Hudson River is a shipping lane. The East River, because it means Hell's Gate, and the Upper East Side is basically, it's 30 knots. I mean, the water is fast. Your currents, you jump in, even if you're an Olympic swimmer, the water is just going to take you all the way down, spit you out at the bottom of Manhattan into the New York Harbor. And then you might, if you're still floating, you might end up at the Verrazano Bridge by Staten Island. That is exactly what would happen. So there's no way 99.99% of the people get off the island if they shut it down. The island is loaded with bridges and tunnels. They can shut that down in 5 hours. So from midnight to 5 a.m., you wake up and you're a prisoner, right? Then they take away your food. Then they take away water, electricity, power, anything. You are a prisoner in a high rise. And I've done a lot of research on these smart cities, right? They were called that more than 15-minute cities, but this is what it's called. These are vertical concentration camps. And I'm like, wow. And then you saw the saw the news video or the mobile phone video of Chinese people being welded into their high-rise apartments in China. And I'm like, yep, that could happen in New York. And so we picked up and moved to Florida. I've been here for 3 years now.
Yeah, that is quite a story. And I have been to New York City. We visited there in 2019 and went on the Staten Island ferry, spent some time over there, um, stayed at Jersey City, and then took the bus across over underneath. Then you got on the subway. So I know exactly what you're saying. You're surrounded. People don't understand that it's all green, and then you get to New York, and you got all this water all over the place, and it's just bridges, bridges, bridges get you, or subways get you to where you need to go. So I wanted to start out with and ask, in your name, you've got unrestricted warfare, which is your show.
Well, yeah, well, so I used to be at another network, and it used to be called Unrestricted Truce. I did not want to
Okay.
I did not want to take that name with me. I did 460 episodes at the old network on under that banner. And the minute day I left, they took it behind the paywall because I guess I'm too far out with the watered down content that network does. I mean, that's basically how I look at it.
Right. Well,
Right, which is fine. Like basically lead follow, get out of the way. Get out of the way in this case. Get out of the way. You're not leading me in the right direction anymore. So I turned down a contract offer with the old network, and I said, I don't, forget it. So right now, Josh Reed, a former host there, and a couple other hosts from America, Amp Media, seven of us left. Seven left. They were just like offers were stupid, ridiculous. We knew the content would be watered down. We left. Good luck to them, but we got the hell out in time. And we're launching decentralized.media, and we're in the middle of doing that right now. And we'll have announcements coming in February about exactly where we're at. But we're going to launch a full-blown platform that we're going to own all the infrastructure, everything, and we're going to do things differently than what was done in the previous position. So unrestricted warfare is the name I borrow because the Chinese borrow from us all the time. So I'm going to borrow from them, the communists. 1999, two colonels from the PLA, the People Liberation Army, wrote unrestricted warfare, and they spent, typical Chinese, they spent 9 years observing the American military, observing American culture, observing everything. So they watched how software was the king of the day in the first Gulf War in 1991, where you could send cruise missiles from a ship, cruise missiles from a allied country, and the one cruise missile would get there 30 minutes early, and it would simply just do this, right? It would wait for the second cruise missile to come in, and then when they were both in range, then the software and the satellites would allow them to strike whatever the target was in Iraq. That is absolutely what happened. So the Chinese were like, we can never beat the U.S. military this way, right? We know they've stolen lots of stuff. They were given lots of stuff, a lot of backdoors from Hillary Clinton. Probably Bill Gates was giving up a lot of stuff. I would say Google, Microsoft, all of them have absolutely given technology over to China. China was backward kind of country back in early 1990s, right? Even Shenzhen, which is north of across the bay of Hong Kong, it didn't even exist. They were just starting to build that in 93. So China was a backwater place. But the colonels and all of the, Communist Party members that came in the United States obviously gave these guys lots of information, and they realized we can't beat you in a kinetic war. They're getting close now, especially in the Navy, but they're still not quite there yet. But they realize we can destroy them economically. We can destroy them culturally. We destroy them education because, Marxism, like I said at the beginning of the show, started in public schools in the U.S. in the 1970s.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So that was all happening. In fact, what people rarely know is that when George Bush, the first one, number 41, George H.W. Bush, he went, Nixon and Kissinger went into China to create the great economic deal.
70s.
1972.
Yep.
Right? George Bush, the CIA, went behind them and signed 700 manufacturing plants, contracts, 700 manufacturing plants that is the beginning of offshoring all the manufacturing in the United States. So when people were shocked by the late 70s and early 80s, like, hey, what's happening to all the manufacturing? One U.S. town after another, U.S. Bethlehem Steel, all these towns were dying,
Yes.
right? And that's because they offshored a lot of our manufacturing. So
Yes.
this is all. So it's been a long road for China to come compete with us now, but they're ready to invade Taiwan, and then they're ready to go maybe to war with the Biden regime, and we'll have to see how that plays out.
Well, I find it interesting is, and this is off some of the topics we're going to cover, but I've been listening to Scott Ritter, and he
Yep.
talks about how the Houthis are actually able to lock down, and there's nothing the United States can do over the waterways over there, and the shipping channel, which has really put a kibosh in the Israeli situation because Israel and United States are like fast together. And he's saying they've got technology. They can run little drones. They can do underwater drones. They can do in-sky drones. And this is something I've thought for quite some time, that a lot of what United States does is pick on other countries that can't fight back.
Yeah,
And
but
now
but Iran, Russia, and China have been
they're
doing
all,
well, been supplying some of this technology to Yemen. I used to get my coffee from Yemen in 2010. I was pissed off at the Arab Spring. So I could no longer get Yemen has got the best coffee in the world for whatever reason. It was absolutely
well,
phenomenal.
and who launches those springs? Who's behind
Uh,
those?
Obama, Hillary,
CIA.
CIA, but it
I
was
mean,
on their watch.
yes, and it actually, if you, I think there's several books written about 50, 60 coups and color
Yeah.
revolutions, all created by our own CIA, because it fits within the
What,
globalist
what,
mindset.
let's explain what the CIA is to the people. CIA is not an intelligence agency. It does
Disruption agency.
two things really well. It's a spy agency in a sense that surveils against Americans. It's really good at that, and surveils against governments they want to regime change. Really good at that.
Yep.
It's also involved in direct action, which again is about overthrowing governments, right? Corporations that don't play the globalist cabal money game. And this
Yes.
is why we're in a much different situation than any time in human history. What's happening now is CIA threatened, the money system is going to crash. Who will be in charge of the money on the other side? White hats or the dark hats? If it's the white hats, the CIA is done. It is finished. It's over. The Democrat Party's finished. It will be over too. We're really at that cusp. Is it going to happen this year? I hope so. I could care less about the election. The election might be on the calendar 11 months away. In my view, it might as well be 10 years away, because we're only, what's today, the 12th of January? We've had so much action from the earthquakes in Japan on day one, the Epstein client list, right? The false flag fake aliens in the Miami Mall as a complete narrative change from the Epstein Island. Then we had the 30th anniversary of J6, and we've got the war expanding. We got the Chabad in Brooklyn, right, being exposed as potential sex trafficking tunnels and things, right, doing a bloody mattress, and of course New York City is trying to hide this criminality. So instead of investigating it thoroughly, they went in with concrete trucks at night and poured concrete at the concrete. That's my background. Oh, deep foundations in Philadelphia, right? Some foundations in New York City, pouring concrete. They did it to fill up the tunnels. And
I,
it's like, is that really how you handle an investigation?
well, they did that with 9/11. Remember, you got to remember that they quickly shut things down, and they started carting stuff off before there was even investigation. And then we got the official.
So then you know how powerful the Hasidic Jews are in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Now we really got a taste of it. Forget the potential crimes they committed. They're really powerful for that to even get the city to back them up. It's kind of shocking, right? I know we had the Crown Heights riots between Hasidic Jews and blacks back in 1991, thereabouts, and it's like, but this now we like, how do they have pull over our government to break the law? The government broke the law. You have crimes there. You have blood on a mattress. You got to go investigate. No, let's just skip all the procedures, all the legal law procedures. Let's just backfill everything with concrete. Amazing.
You know, what's interesting is the report that I watched was, and I don't do a lot. I know that's your cup of tea, um, but it was the report came out. There was two factions, and in the two factions is that there's one that thought the Messiah has already come and they worship them, and this guy, some rabbi, and then another one who thinks he's coming up. So that's your two factions. One has the meeting house. There's a bathhouse down the street. They're all owned by the same one. And the young guys are in there going through the bathhouse over to the other place at night and doing their secretive stuff. And that's why they did it. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? You wouldn't take time to build tunnels for something like that. There's got to
No, of
be
course
some
not.
other much deeper
Cover
deeper.
story is always BS. And
Of
it's,
course.
how do you know it's BS? Because it's a flimsy story.
Yes.
No, that's not real at all. Doesn't feel real, doesn't taste real, doesn't sound real. You know, something got like, no, this is wrong. And just go with that first feeling. Because when you
Thank
got
you.
it's wrong, just stay with it.
And what you're telling me is they're quickly in there, just literally pouring cement in there and filling
I've
it
seen the
up.
videos. Like I said, I'm in construction. I got
Right.
friends in New York Police Force. Believe me, I got access to what I need to get access to.
Well, and that brings me to my first topic is propaganda. Because let's face it, what the government they create little notices. They send them off. Used to be by fax. Now they do it by email. And the news services pick these up, Reuters or UPI, any of these guys, and AP, and they send it off. It gets dispersed to all the thousands of stations out there, and they sit there and they read off of it.
Correct.
The guys like you and I, they're supposedly doing some investigate. They don't do anything. They're just a pretty face. They read what's put in front of them.
Parrots.
They're parrots. And so this has been around mainstream media for decades and decades and decades. So I want us to talk a little bit about how propaganda has been used to get us to go to wars or to support their efforts to go to war and to promote. Let's look at, we're going to talk about the COVID thing and the CDC a little later with your book. But let's talk about the role of propaganda. How is it used in our everyday life, James, to promote?
Well, it's been used ad nauseum and relentlessly during the COVID age, last 4 years. Just totally insane amount of gaslighting propaganda it does, right? They go out and try to destroy the reputation of ivermectin and HCQ, hydroxychloroquine, as an example. They promote the vaccines are safe and effective, right? They pretend they don't know where myocarditis, pericarditis, turbocancers come from. That's one example, right? They're now trying to get the sheep that are still out there, the normies that are still not quite awake, the ones that are completely sheep. They're continuing daily to say, hey, if you breathe too hard, too heavy, you're going to have a heart attack, right? Or if you're in warm weather or whatever it is. Like they even had one on farts, literally. Climate change farts, and it could give you a heart attack or whatever. They just go on, and they're lying, and thanks to Obama, he changed the laws in 2013 that the media could lie.
Yeah,
that
that's
they
still
could write propaganda lie. And if you think of Satan has no power on this planet whatsoever. What does Satan have? Authority. Only if you give it up.
yes.
Only if you make a deal with the devil, like fame in Hollywood versus, I have to be sacrifice babies, right? Be a baby killer. That's one, right? Or you get informed consent. We're not getting informed consent anymore, people, but you're right. So Satan has authority only if you give it up. You're not under the armor of God, right? That's the only thing. But he's a grandmaster at what? Deception. So the one arm of Satan, this is how I remember it, is the media, is propaganda and lies. The other arm is concealment. Satan is a great concealer, right? Omitting information, right? Censoring and banning all the stuff that technology does. So this is what we're faced against. I'll give you an example, an old example of omitting truth. So if you go to the 1599 Geneva Bible, which was written 50 years before the King James Version, you went to Ephesians 6:12, you'd find the principalities, powers of darkness, so on and so forth. That very famous section, right? They took out a few words. They talked about not only powers and principalities of darkness and worldly governors. They took out those 3 words, and worldly governors. Holy mackerel!
Wow.
Had I grew up in as a child in the modern world and learned that worldly governors or governments are evil and dark and corrupt, I might have had wore a skeptical hat from day one about government instead of giving them, continue giving them rope. Okay, you guys stole money here, you raised taxes here. It would have been a whole different mindset, and I wouldn't have been alone. There'd been an army of us. We would have behaved differently. So those 3 words taken out of the Bible is concealment. We didn't get the exact truth. We got a partial truth, but we got a lie with those 3 words missing. How would you, Steve, growing up, coming to this the last 4 years, what's your reaction to knowing that, the enemy is also worldly governments or governors? What's your reaction to that?
I would, when I look at Scripture, and I'm a guy that spends a lot of time there, the beast in Revelation is the government.
Yep.
And when you understand that there are multiple yes, because the governing authorities are the enemy. It's not just the spiritual. They are being puppeted by the demonic realm, by the spiritual celestial beings that rule over these nations and rule over these cities and rule over these townships. But if you read that, you would say, holy smokes, you mean the government isn't my friend? The government is it's
not going to protect us. Marxism wouldn't be able to write his great works. I wouldn't call them great, right? Or the CIA of the day in the 1850s wouldn't have wrote Engels and Marx because they didn't write it, in my opinion. This is all part of the psyop world we're living. You know what I love about Epstein Island list? We had Steve Hawking on there. Now the minute you saw Steve Hawking there, the paralyzed this and that, he said to himself, this is jumping the shark.
Yes, right. Thank you.
It has nothing to do with black holes, excuse me. No. And he's an operation, CIA operation. It's the first reaction I had. I look like he's an operation. Oh, so he's not the good scientist with a deformity that we've been sold. So we've been sold. And then you had the screamer like this, and it records this, and this technology apparently existed 30 years ago. No, it didn't.
Nope.
Not at all. And that's how you know it's a lie. Go back and watch some old Steve Hawking interviews 20 years ago, 25 years. That technology did not work at all. So what they did, the CIA, because it's an operation, what they clearly did, this is part of the propaganda and lie, right? We believed in that operation.
Yes.
Oh, they already had a script to scroll up on an iPad of its day. This is before iPads, by the way, people. And then they had a voice recorded. So the device they created for Steve Hawking was basically that. He
was a fraud. That was a fraud. There's a couple guys I've been watching, and they're totally making fun of this. And it's the Helen Keller. When you go, how did Helen Keller speak like British accent when she couldn't hear? Then you realize we have been duped for.
And even people talk about Anne Frank being, and I have not done the research. I'm not going to say she's fake or not fake, but she could be an operation as well. And I have to leave my mind open because once you see one operation, who else is an operation, right? Who else is used as a propaganda tool against us? And so therefore it's wide open. You, Steve Hawking, everything is on the table.
Einstein.
Even Charlie Manson. Was Charlie Manson really a serial killer, or was he used to scare people to behave a certain way at the end of the 60s?
This is what I delve into. I think about these things, and once you've been exposed to one operation, you see the telltale signs of another operation. Every time you see the signs of an operation, then you're like, hold on. When I've been told that Stephen Hawking or Einstein, and it's like, but then what was their messaging really being put out? It was contrary to biblical teachings, contrary to biblical facts. The idea that God is the creator, that we are in a limited situation of where we live, then all of a sudden you realize, why are they putting these people out that say, oh, it's infinite and blah 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 blah, and they just spew out things that cannot be provable because you can't prove any of these theories. Theories are
No,
theories.
no.
But they takes your mind away from the solid, the that which is real, and makes you live in a fantasy world. And when you live in a fantasy world, you're easily persuaded. So then you have Star Trek come along and, hey, we're just going to travel through space.
All part of the propaganda.
It's all part of the propaganda. And I love science fiction, but it's fiction. And when you realize Jet Propulsion Laboratories was formed by, and I keep forgetting this guy, a guy that was deeply involved with Aleister Crowley, the
Yep.
Church of Satanism,
I
sex
know I know the
rituals.
story. Yep. Keep going.
When you look at these things and you look at all the artifacts that go along with it, you realize this isn't science. This is occultism. I got this is a little book by called Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare, Michael H. Hoffman. And he goes into the weeds of talking about that this guy with Jet Propulsion, I forgot, I was trying to do some research. They're there at the Trinity bomb site when they're gonna do the nuke.
Yep.
They had created the golems. They were trying to create a golem. And I'm like, what's a golem? The golem is a fictional character in a novel from the Lord of the Rings. And then you find out that the golem actually is part of Kabbalah. And
Yeah.
Kabbalahism was this idea that if you had the right magic, you could actually create human beings out of clay. And
Uh,
I'm getting
or
things
clones.
dude. What's that?
Clones.
Clones. And it's fabrication. They believe this stuff. It's not, they can't do it, but this is all part of their mindset. It's
It is
not
part of the
denied.
mindset, and they actually believe it.
Yes.
And if you're a Satanist or Luciferian or Baal worshiper or Baphomet, doesn't matter. You're a liar, and they lie all the time.
Yes.
People, the old frog and scorpion story where the scorpion can't swim across the river, so the frog takes him across, and the frog makes the scorpion promise not to sting him. And of course, when they get to the other side, the scorpion's okay. The scorpion stings him, and the frog goes, "Why did you do that?" Because I'm a scorpion. That's what I do. Right? When you're dealing with Satanists, they lie. They lie. They lie. They lie. They don't care about murder. A lot of them don't have human empathy. You got to realize the people that work in the government, talk about the middle managers below, right? The bureaucrats, they are not into this at all.
No.
They don't realize who they're working for. They don't realize they're working for the beast, but that's what they're doing.
I wanted to clarify that because I know a lot of individuals who work for various government situations.
I worked for 3 different DOTs, Department of Transportation, with them. I worked for contracting companies or civil engineering firms alongside. So I didn't work in the government itself, but I worked with them on projects. Department of Transportation, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York City, right? I worked in the New York City, New Jersey Port Authority on JFK Airport. I worked alongside the Bureau of Standards out of Washington, OSHA, on and on and on. I worked with the quasi New York State entity called Battery Park City Authority, which it was built on the original excavation of the original Twin Towers in 1968. I've worked directly with government agencies for a big part of my life.
Yep.
And a lot of them are just really good people.
Yes.
So really good people, they're just doing their job. They have no idea about any of this.
And that's why when people think, well, the government, we're not talking about the employees. We are talking about the system that becomes big G, government, and God becomes small g. And we have to have some kind of a government in place to keep things rolling. But our forefathers said, you got to keep tabs on this. So I wanted to talk about one of the things that you were talking about, suppressing the information. So it used to be that you had your big 3, CBS, ABC, NBC, and whatever Walter Cronkite said, it had to be the truth. I mean, everybody just,
and there was no way to go vet it in any direction. There was no internet back in the 60s, 70s, or even 80s. There was none, zero. Right?
Not at all.
So you think about the authors doing like The Curse of Canaan was written in 1987. That was a U.T.S. Mullins. So all of that book had nothing to do with online. He had to go through libraries. He had to go through archives somewhere. He had to interview a bunch of people in order to put that book together. That book would be a lot easier to write today than it was back then, but that's just the way it was. It was a different world back then.
It was live. You're exactly right. The amount of time spent, whereas you and I can get on and we can use our research, and I was going to talk about that a little later, but the internet has, to me, it was created as a military project, as a way
Yep.
of communicating. It got into the hands of everybody. It is it is the great
But
equalizer.
the cabal wanted that. Why? Why did it launch www in W in the Hebrew language? I believe is I believe somehow it's www is 666 number one. The World Wide Web 666 people. So just, but they
Number
wanted us eventually to make us prisoners on the CBDC, which is supposed to come out at some point this year, somewhere in the West. Right. This is so. In order for us to ever get on something like this, they had to create the internet commercially. Right. They had to create satellites. I had a friend that used to work in telecom. He went to a conference in 2000, 24 years ago. He sat down at this telecom conference with a satellite engineer, electronics engineer, and asked him, "What's actually inside the guts of this satellite?" Right? He said only 10% is communication, even though they call it communication satellites, they're not. 90% is financial. Well, financial for what? There was no financial transaction by satellites way back in the day. It is all the Starlink satellites that U.S. Space Force, in my opinion, taken over, were going to imprison us through our phones, through the Chinese currency. I believe the White Hats are in full control of all those satellites.
Well, I find, and I haven't done the investigation on that. I just, I believe that it's also when in my book, which I'm not going to mention because I got to get a publishing deal situated, fixed. Um, the the Bilderberg Group put out
Yep.
a silent weapon for quiet wars document. Now I've got that in there. And anybody,
1954.
thank you. In there, it was about collecting data on you and I. And
Yep.
it says if we collect enough data, we can know what's going to happen and we can control the future, basically, in a nutshell. And I'm
Yep.
thinking, and it says, these fools, they give all their information for census, they give all their information for their tax returns. We can collect it all. And I'm thinking, oh, brother, they fast forward to Facebook, LinkedIn, social media networks. We give them everything we got.
Ancestry.com.
Yes.
23andMe. Give up your DNA, people. Just do it. I've never done that. We'll never do that ever.
The point is, the more knowledge they have on you, the more they can frame the narrative. They can frame the programming. They can, and when I talk about programming,
They
what's
can target you if they got your DNA. Figure you got some weak links in your DNA somewhere with microwave weapons, frequencies, whatever. So it's not just the data. It's much further. They can
yes,
actually go out and cause bodily harm to you.
it's an something to explore because the more data, the more they can, it's like having a dossier on somebody.
And
And
we have generative AI, so they have no problem smashing data into a cluster and going through it and spitting out stuff. So the generative AI, which is commercial use. So here we go again, right? It's almost 30 years to the year from the launch of the World Wide Web with Netscape in particular. It's just really interesting that we got that, but we know all corporations, all the banking, right? The BlackRocks, Blackstones, all those companies, Vanguard, State Street, and all the militaries, they all using AI, been using for a number of years, and they'll be using against us. And we have to understand that.
but what's really interesting, James, is the point is we can turn around and we can use the same technology for us.
And going back to the satellite story, what has God done throughout the Bible. Like take Queen Esther as an example. You take the weapon of the enemy and eventually give it to the children of God to use that weapon against the enemy.
Yes.
Right. So think about the vaccines, think about Fauci and Bill Gates at some point getting lethal injection, right, for what they've done, crimes against humanity. Think about the satellites that were supposed to imprison and slave all humanity, free us. Why is that? Because all the stolen gold from all of the nations around the world, all the kingdoms, so on and so forth, have been retaken by the military alliance and repatriated to all the countries. You know, the cabal, the Vatican, they kept, for whatever reason, they keep extraordinary notes. Even in Cambodia, even during Khmer Rouge, they had that, got the name of the prison, but they had a prison where they tortured 21,000 Cambodians, and they kept extensive records on everybody they killed, and how they killed them, electrocuted them on a metal bed frame, right? They tortured them, whatever. They kept extensive records. It's just bizarre to me. If I'm out there to slaughter people, I'm not there to sit there and, like, write a ledger, but that's what they did. And that's what the cabal does. And that's what the Vatican, they for whatever reason, these Satanists love to keep records. I have no idea why.
James, anytime I do a research, I put in some words, PDF, PDF behind it. Up pops all these military documents, all these intel documents, everything. It's on their websites.
I do put PDF in as well. You go search whatever term you want, and then, like Steve says, you throw in the word same term. Now you put PDF in there, and up come a whole bunch of different documents they couldn't find.
And it's what's interesting is it's called notice, or they have to keep, because I just got through signing papers for a house, and my God, it took us 2 hours, and this is after the fact that we've been doing it all online. All this called documentation. We live in a mercantile environment. Our United States of America, it's United States Corporation. District of Columbia is a corporation.
Maritime port. But Trump dissolved the USA Inc. A few years ago, by the way.
Well, it would be interesting because I've
you know how you know this? You can just go look at a FEMA press release. Even last year, it no longer says DC. It's just Washington only. Capital letters Washington, but DC's gone. Even if you go to some airports now, you'll see DC is not part of Washington anymore.
Oh, I have to do more on that.
Columbia's gone. It's gone, people. It's not disappearing. And you have to go look at the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve was taken over by the Trump administration in the CARES Act in March 2020. Pelosi, you want a blank check for vaccines, Operation Warp Speed, and for remdesivir? Here's your blank check. We're gonna take everything that the Federal Reserve does, and we're gonna put it underneath the U.S. Treasury, which allowed for the first time ever that the U.S. central banks could have a forensic audit by Trump's team. And what's Trump really good at? Everyone's like, he's a celebrity, he's a real estate developer, he's a businessman. He's a master of debt. He knows the banking system better than the cabal does.
So when they floated, but the Federal Reserve floated trillions of dollars, both under Trump and Biden administration, and the world banks have done this all over. Every country in the world has had to have trillions of dollars infused because they shut down the economy purposely so they could infuse more debt into the system, because banks only make money off of debt. They don't make money off of paying out. Or
2019, I read a report on nations in debt. Let's just say a round number, there was 205 nations in 2019. 200 of them were underwater. We're all in massive debt. Norway and maybe a couple of, because Norway has the oil field, right? Norway and a couple others, no debt at all, right? So what's interesting is the debt that people read online. Everyone's like, especially the sheep are so emotional. Like, oh, we crossed 34 trillion. We're soon to cross 35 trillion.
We're hundreds of trillions.
Oh, I know that, but just the headlines in the newspapers.
Right.
They keep the real number away. But that number is not with the Republic of the United States, people. That number is with the corporation that used to be USA Incorporated. USA Incorporated is going through bankruptcy right now. Right, the reset's going to wipe out all of these. You have the BRICS nation now doing a whole different thing, gold-backed currencies, and eventually the dollar is going to die temporarily. It will come back. but they got to crash the system worldwide, reset it all the, and I guess, the Bible talks about this overnight, more or less, whatever it may be. You're going to have the super rich become bankrupt overnight and the children of God have a jubilee. I mean, basically, that's what's supposed to come spiritually.
So do you think, well, I've heard these. I've heard rumors of what you're talking about, James. I have not delved deeply into that. I've heard rumors of this. And I've often thought, what would happen if every country had their debts wiped away? The only people what the money already is just it's printed out of nothing. There's nothing backing our money
No,
except
there,
for our
there, there
hard
isn't.
labor.
So the corporations that own all that debt are just going to go bankrupt. They're all out of business. You're going to see big corporations go down. You're going to see probably 2 of the 4 big banks in the United States go bankrupt. Right? You're literally, what are the 4 banks in the United States? And this is not, I have no inside information, no source, just my observation for the last 4 years. You got JP Morgan, you got Citibank, you got Bank of America, and Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has the most real estate mortgage debt of any bank in the United States, period. It's backed by Deutsche Bank.
Oh, Deutsche Bank. Boo.
Deutsche Bank has been in trouble. They're up to their eyeballs in a real estate crash. They'll be out of business. Both of them will be out of business when the crash happens. 1, 2. What's Bank of America? Oh, Bank of America should have been broke on the maybe 16th, 17th, or 18th of September 2008. Right? We had the Lehman Brothers failure on Monday the 15th. Right? George Bush and Hank Paulson, the Federal Reserve, got the day. Right? They had to infuse $120 billion like in 2 hours on the morning of September 18th, Thursday. Without that, the entire system would have ground to a halt. They would have been bankrupt then. So they saved the day. They then said, well, Bank of America, if you really want to stay in business, you're going to have to buy and merge with Merrill Lynch. So they set that up. So Merrill Lynch is doing really bad now. Bank of America is in deep trouble. And together, they're going to probably both get the axe. This is just my opinion. Not a financial advisor. I'm just making observations here. JP Morgan will get hit. Citibank will get hit. But I think they'll both be in business post-crash. Just my opinion.
It's interesting because here in Washington State we had WAMU, which crashed, and we had stock in it, and it was like sell, sell, sell. Boom, we lost all of our money in that. And there was one that was covering all Seafirst, and it was covering all one of the nuclear plants that were being built. And then it turned out that they used faulty materials, and the whole thing, billions of dollars out the window. Seafirst crashed. So banks do crash. It doesn't mean that
Silicon Valley Bank crashed last spring alongside with Signature Bank the same weekend, people.
And banks do crash. It's not like and they get merged with another one, and then they pack up. And it's funny because your mortgage, you buy a mortgage, and guess what? Within several weeks, it gets sold to somebody else. So they package and bundle these mortgages, and they keep floating them from 4 to 4 or 5. I mean, it's amazing what they do with financial instruments. Now, we still have you're still making your payments. You're still got your title. You own that property as long as you're making your payments. But the banking system is a very interesting animal. And used to be able, you could go find bank rating services. Lace was one of the companies that did that, and I looked them up, and they've been taken over. It's not as easy now, by the way, to find ratings on banks, how well they rate. But I wanted to talk. I wanted to
What
get back.
people can do is they can ask if the banks that they're at are they Basel 3 compliant? Why?
What's
Because
that
that's
called?
part of that is new quantum financial system. They're either Basel 3, BSEL, it's Switzerland, Basel 3 compliant. If they're not Basel 3 compliant, I would think about finding a bank that is. That's just, again, it's my personal observation.
Well, that's some information I just wrote down because we're always moving our money into smaller banks, regional banks in our neck of the woods.
Right. And so what we've done in my family here is I still use one of the big banks. One of the 2 I think is going to survive out of New York. Still have that account. We have another one, TIAA Craft, which I think is called TIA, which is a huge pension one. They're very conservative. And then we have a credit union down here locally And so what I'm expecting is we might not get access for a couple of days, a week, whatever, 2 weeks, whatever it's going to be, to some of our banks, but not all three. I don't see that happening. And we got
Right.
cash in case it does happen.
Well, I wanted to talk about a little bit about back to when you are bringing forth information
Mhm.
and someone doesn't like it, they tend to use another suppressive tactic, which is to character assassinate, vilify things, or set. What's that?
Yes, I'm with you on this.
And I found an interesting. I want to play a little tidbit of a interview of John Pilger. Are you familiar with this guy?
Yes, I am. Go ahead, play a tidbit, and then we'll talk about the biggest target of this right after.
All right. So here's an introduction, and here's the thing.
Last week, Richard V. Allen, a Pentagon advisor, told us why a regime change is needed in Iraq and why America is the country to do it. Tonight, we hear why an attack by the US is just another form of terrorism. That from award-winning journalist and documentary maker John Pilger. His documentary, Paying the Price, Killing the Children of Iraq, looked at the effects of the UN sanctions, which he's likened to genocide. The war has set much of the world against the Bush administration, which says it will disarm Iraq and get rid of Saddam Hussein. A man who, after all, has launched 2 disastrous wars that have killed at least 2 million. A tyrant who has used poison gas and brutally oppressed his own people. Well, President Bush says the UN Security Council has not lived up to its responsibilities, and so America is taking action. John Pilger, good evening. If there was ever a case of a just war, wouldn't this be it?
No. And in your lead up there, you left out 1 million people. Extraordinary. You said that I referred to, I likened the sanctions to a form of genocide.
You were quoting Richard Halliday, I think.
Dennis Halliday, the Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations.
Did you agree with him?
Well, yes, from what I saw in Iraq, yes, I agreed with him. But before you go on, your lead up justified your question. And in fact,
There you go. Is that guy wise? Your lead up justified your question.
Great.
This guy, he just passed away, by the way. He's
Yeah,
a
he did.
girl.
But that's why you handle. You know, you go into any territory when you go to mainstream media, so you got to be prepared. And he's cool, calm, under fire, just a typical smooth British gentleman. It's just amazing. So 1967, the CIA created. Going back to CIA, created the part of the propaganda, the conspiracy theorist, wacko label in order to just destroy the truth movement on the JFK assassination and the Warren Commission. Well, now that's really backfired in the CIA because now we mock this conspiracy theory. Now I'm a conspiracy factualist, right? We're laughing at the CIA. Guys are a bunch of clowns, communists in action. That's what I call CIA. You're a bunch of clowns, right? You know, whatever. You got like Satan, you got no power over me. Really, at the end of the day, you have no power.
No.
So what happened? So the open source intelligence. Now people say Q is a psyop. All right, let's really break this down. First of all, the first Q post came on what? On October 28, 2017. Same day as Special Counsel John Durham opened up the Durham investigation into all the hoaxes. Wow, that's kind of strange that they both opened the same day, but hey, never know. It could be just a coincidence. At the end of the day, though, people to this day still believe, I'm talking about educated people who are awake about vaccines and all that, they still believe Q's a psyop. And I said, really? So you think the CIA created this fake Q, had all these 5,000 posts, they would then have these posts, some of them riddles, some of them 3-4 year deltas, whatever. You really think that the Q posts, which educated and woke up easily above 5 million people worldwide who are young, who are in their 20s, in their 30s, who really now couldn't do this 4 years ago, but today, last year, and this year, they can deconstruct a false flag in a day. So the media comes out with a story. and within a day, it's bullshit. And you know, a bunch of young women and TikTok and stuff, they all destroy the narrative.
James, don't you know the
So
babies?
if the CIA meant to like educate 5 million plus people, knock yourself out, because now they're deconstructing the CIA's narrative. They're destroying mainstream media.
Yes.
And like, so what do they come up with? They come up with QAnon as if it was some kind of a virus or something. QAnon, first of all, as Q said, there's Q, the open intel operation, and anonymous patriots, the digital soldiers, the ones who are doing all the work now, right? They're crowdsourcing information. Where Steve, you and I used to do our own rabbit holes 10 years ago. I now go on different social media channels like, oh, that's good. This woman's great. I bring those little clips onto my shows all the time. One is they're great. A lot of them are women, by the way, young women.
Yes.
They're really into this.
Yes.
And these are not conspiracy people. So if the CIA meant to wake them up, they failed. They failed spectacularly. So if anyone tried to calls Q a psyop, you lost. Because either way, you got 5 million people woken up. So whether it's real or psyop, you get the same result. They're awake. So anyone that says QAnon, you know they're full of baloney, because there's no such thing as QAnon. It does not exist. It was never QAnon. So any patriot calls himself QAnon, he's an idiot because he doesn't really know what Q is all about. He might claim he does, but not really. And the media uses it, and so now you can spot a fake, a fugazi a mile away. He goes, oh, QAnon. It's like, and why do you think when Trump was interviewed in the CNN town hall, don't you know anything about QAnon? Trump goes, no. He was honest. He certainly knows about the Q military operation, open source. I guarantee you that. He's never heard of QAnon because he wasn't lying. He doesn't know because it doesn't exist. That was the beauty of that. And I forgot the name of the young woman at CNN trying to corner Trump, like, come on, admit it, QAnon. Trump's like, nope, sorry, never heard of it. Because it doesn't exist, people.
Well, and you mentioned this, and so with this whole Gaza Israeli thing, immediately people are going, we got the reports immediately from mainstream media that babies were being butchered and all this kind of stuff. And then all the individuals like myself, yourself, all these young people are going, within days, are going, hey, that's fake. That's fake. Here's the proof. That didn't happen. And then even New York Times.
Even the hospital was bombed with 500 dead Palestinians. That never happened either.
No.
No, they would show a little crater with like 2 cars blown up in the parking lot, and the hospital circled it. So people are destroying the narrative.
Yes.
This is the real impact, and they can't shut off social media, especially with Elon Musk at the helm of Twitter.
But this is part of it too. People have their own phones.
Yep.
And I know that you can fake things through videos, but this is quick, it's efficient, and it gets posted. Even if it gets pulled down, enough people have captured it.
It's live stream. People capture things right away. I'm always downloading things that really interest me. I print PDFs of like stories that come out. Even if they're crazy, I'm like, PDF goes into a file.
Yep.
And then a week later, you find out it's gone, right? And then when you go on to Wayback Machine, it's gone from there too, right? It gets scrubbed. Well, I'm ahead of them. I see something I like. It's PDF. First thing I do, I don't even read the story. PDF, boom, I got it.
I'm the same way. I've got my computers loaded with this stuff. Now I got hard drive that loads it up on there. And folks, that's one thing if you're a researcher, when you find a copy online, download it so you can have that in an arsenal. What was interesting when I was doing research for my book about, and I included all the stuff about CDC and the National Health Institute and all these kind of things. I'm going to their sources. I'm going to the documents, and I'm going screen capture, and I put those in the book. Even I go, this is what they said it used to say. Now this is what they say today. What? Yeah. How did things change?
It's like going back and editing the Bible. It's no different.
Yes, and that is, as someone who's been now exploring other versions, multiple versions, digging in deep and going into it, I love the fact that I've actually got a version called the Sefer, and I have not really spent much time, but it goes back and has all the original language of Elohim and Yahweh and all the different names. So it's not like oh, we put God, Lord, God. No, it's actually the original names. And the book of Enoch is in there, the book of Joshua is in there, the book of Jubilee, all the other books that supposedly weren't supposed to be in the canon. And yet I'm reading Enoch. I spend a lot of time in it. And I'm going, holy smokes, it's talking about the Son of God. It's talking about the elect one. Why is that not being accepted by the rabbis?
It also talks about pearls. Pearls, there's no oysters of that magnitude in the Mideast, are there? Really strange. And they're talking about some gemstones that don't exist in the Mideast either. So where did that come from? Well, there's a group out of the Philippines, of all places, right, called the God Culture. You go onto YouTube, the God Culture. They've gone through fascinating. They've done a lot of research. They believe, and they make a cognizant argument that the Garden of Eden is in the Philippines. And they believe also that Solomon mines in the Philippines. And the argument there is, before South Africa found gold 150 years ago, Philippines had the most gold in the world. By far. Most natural gold, more than anywhere else. They also have a bunch of islands that have Hebrew origin. And they also believe that the word Cebu is derived from Sheba. And it goes on from one thing to another. So you don't have to believe everything else, but they go into Enoch, they go into Jubilees, and they bring the stuff out. And in Enoch, you're going to see certain gemstones and like, the pearl and other trees that really do not exist in the Mideast today, or even 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years. It just is a different place. And so you go back to Enoch, you think about, well, where is this really? Is this really in the Mideast? Even with the Mideast, that was, maybe a jungle, before Sodom got destroyed, right before that. But it's fascinating. You have to keep your mind open. Another good tool for everyone is called the Blue Letter Bible. That is an online, so you don't have to go to a book. It's online. It gives you a bunch, like the 15 different versions of the Bible, right? King James, modern stuff, all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
But it gives you English, it then gives you the original Hebrew, and then it gives you the Greek as well. Because before we ever got to the English version, it went from Hebrew to Greek, and then from Greek to English. This is how it's made. So it gives you a chance to see things differently.
Yeah, you got the Greek Septuagint, which is when they were in Babel, and then the Grecian culture took over in the Greek language. That's the older. There's two different, quote, the older texts that they use. The Septuagint, which is Greek, was a translation of Hebrew into Greek, and then they have other ones. So it's like you start working through that, and thank God for people who love digging in the weeds on that kind of thing. I mean, I have a brother-in-law who does translating into the Manika people over in Africa. He takes the original, and I says, so Joe, why don't you translate baptism into immersion, because that's actually the word. He goes, well, yeah, we can't. I go, I know why you can't, because then you can't. Then sprinkling becomes something that's kind of a different thing. And I'm like, well, and then there's other words that don't get translated because it would offend and so you realize there's so much more for us, James, to learn and explore. And I'm not poo-pooing people out there that hold a different. I'm for myself love exploring. I know you do too, James. We love to explore. And by exploring, your mind gets open bigger and bigger and bigger, and God keeps pouring more things and bringing more things. And
we're in Revelation, so we're going to learn things that are going to disrupt
which is called revealing
understanding of the Bible. I can assure you that.
Yep.
I'm going to disrupt this, right? This is my father's Bible from the 1960s. So some of this text is different than in the modern King James today. Just telling you, they get rid of vessels, or they get rid of wineskins in the gospel and put the word in vessels for some stupid reason. Why wouldn't you just leave wineskins?
Wineskins.
Yeah, why don't you just leave the word, what it was? But no, they have to change it from a wineskin to like a clay vessel. Like, really?
Yeah, but
You go through that and they make these changes. Like, what for? I don't get it.
and so the parable is Jesus saying the kingdom is like new wine. And when you
Yes.
put new wine into old wine skins, leather, they're already firm. And if you put new wine, it's fermenting, it'll blow the seams out. So you have to put the new wine into new skins, so as it ferments and it expands, so the skins accept it and stretch out for that. And what he is saying, what Jesus was really saying is the old covenant is going away. We are under a new covenant because the old
Correct.
covenant cannot hold the spirit that's coming into this world. It wasn't built for that. That we're not going back to temples, we're not going back to bloodlines, no, it's a spirit thing here that all people all over the world can all be introduced and brought into and be made sons and daughters of the Most High through the work that I'm going to do on the cross, fulfilling everything that went all the way back to Genesis. And what is interesting is now we are in the wine. We are the new wine.
We are the new wine. It's a beautiful way to say it. So I'm glad I brought up that analogy. And right, the vessels wouldn't make sense at all because wine's not going to crack open a vessel.
No, a clay pot.
That's why it's excuse the expression, but it's why it's so asinine when they do stuff like this. Dr. Sam Storm, I listen to him once in a while. He's a theologian. He's just fascinating. He also said that Jesus is the new covenant, right?
Yes.
He updates the old covenants. Is that simple? It's very, very easy to understand.
Here's how you think about it. Old will and testament. Old will and covenant. New will and testament. Guess what? You can't have a new will until the old one's dead. So when my dad passed away, the will was enacted. I got the beneficiaries. When Jesus died, the new will took effect.
So one thing, when I drive down to Miami from Sarasota, Florida, I find a good religious station. They interviewed Sam Storm on one of the trips, and he basically said Jesus answered like the Sabbath on Saturdays. He says the Sabbath is every day is equal.
Yes.
Every day is equal.
Let's be honest. He is the Sabbath.
Correct.
We find our rest in Christ because before him, we had to do a sacrificial system, and the whole world was under the weight of guilt. When Jesus came along and fulfilled the final sacrifice, the one and only, we no longer have to do the sacrificial system. We find our rest in Christ. It says, "Take my yoke upon me. It is light." You're not burdened down with carrying all those laws and rules and regulations. And his is grace. Love God, love your neighbor. I mean, that's the two commandments.
That's the only two commandments. Yeah, because no one can fulfill the 10 commandments to begin with. Even if you didn't commit crimes, you have impure thoughts. Like, I want to bump off my neighbor. I lust for my neighbor's wife. All that stuff, right? Right. So we're human. We get that. So he updated everything. Love God and love him like God, right? And then love
our neighbor as ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
James, if we did that, now think about this. If we really operated this, there would be no wars. There
Correct.
would be no more. There would be peace. This world would be paradise. We would travel from country to country to country to country. We'd do international commerce. No one would be trying to screw each other over, kill each other. No sacrifices of babies. No more all this kind of thing.
I believe we're going there in our lifetimes, Steve. I really do. In our lifetimes, we're going there.
I think, some people say, well, we're the worst of time. I'm like, hold on. I been reading that it's called The Bloody Tenets, put out by Roger Williams back in 1630s. And Roger Williams is the founder of Rhode Island.
Interesting.
And he was Providence, you go to Providence, Rhode Island, they got a little information thing. It's all dedicated to him. What he did is he came over, he was here in the United States from England, and he was trying to say, I don't want to follow Catholicism, Methodism. I don't want to, I want to just worship God as I see the Bible teaching me. And every colony would persecute him. He couldn't find peace because if you didn't conform to Calvinists here or the Lutherans over there, you would get thrown out. You would get chased down. And he spent time in the wilderness, and he finally came to this area, Providence, this area, and he said, and he made well with the Indians, and he said, you know what? I want to set up a colony where it's free. So he spent 15 months over in England, got the writ by the king, came back with the money, purchased the land from the natives there, and then he set it up as a independent colony where freedom of religion, and that ended up being in our Constitution. But that was in the 1640s. And his whole book called The Bloody Tenet was his chastisement of the church for killing and slaughtering tens of thousands of people in the name of Jesus. And he said, that's not the kingdom of God. That's not the New Testament.
No.
And yet we've still got people today.
You know what's interesting? We're seeing the destruction now of the Vatican completely. It's being completely dismantled. You're seeing Judaism now
shown for what it really
synagogue
is.
of Satan, the one that's called out, the Canaanites that called out in Revelation. You're seeing that being exposed in Brooklyn and over in Israel, right?
Yep.
You know, who these people really think they are, and Islam will be next. It's only a matter of time. I mean, why in Islam do they circle a black cube? A black cube could be found inside the United Nations and Lucifer Trust. That Satan, hello. So I think people need to wake up to the fact that we don't need all of this tradition, right? All of this idolatry at all, do we?
James, that's one of the things I tell people. The more you spend time in God's word and including these other books that have quote aren't, extra biblical, the more you spend time in there and you open your eyes, the more you realize there's so much tradition within churches. Every denomination is filled with tradition. Zionism is one of them. Dispensational is another one. And this whole idea that God's, I'm like, stop it. We are in the end time. We are in the end times, by the way, is the end of the old covenant. That's what Jesus was saying. End times. It happened then because between Christ's resurrection and the destruction of Jerusalem was 40 years. At the destruction of Jerusalem at 70 AD, that was 40 years. That was it. There was no more temple. It was God's final death nail. It was a nail in the coffin that Jesus predicted. He said it again and again. I'm going to tear down. There's not going to be anything left. And they're going to surround the city. There's so many things. When you look at that and then you realize we are now the new heaven and the new earth in the sense of a spiritual new kingdom is being manifest. And if you look at life, what it was like in the first century compared to what it is, it used to be that slavery was legal. It used to be that everybody owned slaves. Not anymore. It's now frowned upon. It used to be that if you didn't follow my religion, you were persecuted. Not anymore. There are some, but most countries have religious freedom laws. That is a far cry. So when you see, and when we look at what's going on with the United States and its manufacturing terror to go off and terrorize other countries, and they're trying to keep the old system in place. And the young people are rising up and going, I don't want to go in the, I think the military is being deconstructed. Personally, I think the whole agenda that's going on with the LGBT and all that, it's purposely being deconstructed. And I think God's going, yes, we don't need 800 military bases around the world. We need to pull back and allow people to become their own rulers over their own nations.
Correct. In fact, I believe, I'll take it a step further. I believe Trump, Putin, and Xi Jinping are all a part of the White Hat Alliance to destroy the enemy, which is not communist China, but it is communism, but it's really the cabal agents, Rothschild, Rockefellers, all of the reptilians, all of the Vatican, all the kings and queens around the world, all the fake royalty around the world. They're all going to be destroyed. Anyone that involved in human trafficking, adrenochrome harvesting, child sacrifice, it's all going to be destroyed. It's all be dismantled. And so Xi Jinping is a double agent white hat. Why? Well, his father was a communist member and was murdered by Mao. So of course, Xi Jinping, a peasant, was not good educated, right? Because he grew up a peasant. what did he do? He sought revenge, but China revenge is not, I'm going to get him next week. No, it is to spend decades to get revenge. Typical Chinese, never in a rush on revenge. And so what did he do? He plagiarized himself like Harvard, but he did it for a reason though. He wasn't smart enough, right? But like Stalin, so he wasn't intellectual, but he had an iron fist, right? He was able to negotiate, had great stature about him, and he plagiarized himself to pass into Communist Party, and then rose up over the last 20 some years and being full in control. And they tried an assassination attempt on him a year and a half ago, and a coup, and he shot that down. Taiwan, we've been told through the mainstream media, another operation that Taiwan, good. Taiwan has got the balance of the biolabs in the world, right? We got the 46 DoD biolabs, the Fauci biolabs in Ukraine. They uncovered others in Ethiopia. We got some in Indonesia. Now the balance of the biolabs are in Taiwan. So when China goes in, people think about, you read the newspaper. All right, China's going in. We're going to war. Not necessarily the way you think we are. They're going to uncover the truth, I believe, in Taiwan. And Xi Jinping, at the end of the day, will be kind of a Mad Max anti-hero in a way, right? He'll be a hero, right? He'll be destroying evil. Use evil to destroy evil. That's what he'll be doing. And Putin, whoever this Putin is definitely an alliance with Trump. And
So how do you? I have a hard. I'm still trying to rectify the and I've heard many a story in the head of why Trump did Operation Warp Speed. He had no choice. He was back against the wall. It's what the people wanted. And so I'm still, my mind is still going. There's been millions of people died now because of the jab.
We don't know everything yet. One, he was probably lied to a great extent, that they were safe and effective. There were placebos. I believe.
Well, I know there's a lot of placebos. There's no doubt about that.
There's going to be treatment coming. I do know this. I know treatment commercially coming probably in a month to deal with the spike proteins and the graphene oxide. So I know this for a fact. But there's probably military technology that's hidden from us, because it's about waking up humanity to go through this threshold moment of no more wars, peace on earth, heaven on earth, like you're saying. We have to go through this process. We really have to go through this process. And if they don't do it right, you're going to have civil war for the next 100 years. And then we're never going to come out of the thrall of the Babylonian beast system. So let's go back, though, to Operation Warp Speed. I came to an epiphany last July, probably. So about 6 months ago, doing the show, and I realized, son of a gun, Donald Trump didn't just say Operation Warp Speed for vaccines only. Everything was Operation Warp Speed. What do I mean by that? All of the weapons, the smart cities, the climate hoax, the Agenda 2030, all of it is Operation Warp Speed. We're now seeing, again, going back to that 5 million plus who've been educated. They're going out there and destroying the climate narrative completely. They're mocking Klaus Schwab, right? We don't no longer look at them as authority figures. We look at them as jokes. You have all of this stuff happening, and it's very, very effective. It's so effective that on Monday in Davos, what happens? We got the Davos conclave. It's a little different this year, though. It's really, of course, they got a little climate change stuff in there, but they have an entire week theme, and the theme is called Rebuilding Trust. Rebuilding Trust. It's not Trump with a trust that's been broken. It's the globalists. They've been shattered. We know their lies. We know the lies about vaccines. We now know there's no virus that really took place, but EMF 5G, right? We know this. We know exactly what happened to a great degree. And so what Trump did, he's done us a favor. Instead of us being enslaved in FEMA camps, quarantine camps like New York State wants us to be, we're going to be free. The whole system is going to crash and burn, right? The BRICS nation, right, as part of the destruction of the Western power grip on global finance, that's being destroyed. You got to let it happen. Yeah, we're going to have maybe a dark month. Yeah, probably, right? So you need food, water. You need your wits about you. You probably don't want to be in a major city. So if you live in a city, you might want to think about Do I have a relative or friend that lives outside the city I can get to? I mean, you really should think about these things because it's not going to be, part of it's not going to be pretty. Think about a birth canal. It's not going to be the easiest birth, but that's what we're going. We're going from dark to light. We're going to be birthed out into a new dawn. We'll never call it new age, new dawn, right? Where the world changes. And we're in the age of Aquarius now. So even the stars are lining up in our favor.
I I find this intriguing. It's going to make my mind think through. I do believe that structures. This has been going through my mind years and years and years and years ago. I was in a little church, and it was a very I would call a very conservative denomination. And I remember sitting at one of the elders. I used to go to the different elders' homes, eat dinner with their wife and him or whatever. And this is probably 40 years ago. This was going on, mid 80s. And I said, Jack, when's this going to change? When is this denomination? When is this guy's going to change some of these things? And he goes, Steve, it'll take my generation to die off, and then you're going to see a change. And that has stuck with me. The old guard has to go away before the new guard. So right now we have, quote, baby boomers that are sitting in most of all positions of Democrat, Republican positions within both local, or I should say national and state level. These guys are all bought and paid for. There's not one of them that are, I mean, maybe
they're infiltrated. They've been bought and paid for. They compromised. Epstein Island, hello, people. They sold their soul.
And even people that you think are good, I produce another show for another, I'll give them a shout out, Mill Creek View, Tennessee podcast. Check them out on Rumble. We've been interviewing J6ers, people who have been arrested, people who have served time. We just interviewed Stewart, I forget his last name. He's going in, he's going to serve 8 months. And not one Republican or Democrat, state or local representative has come to their aid. They're all mum's the word. They're allowing the FBI to run the criminal organization that they are and imprison these people. So I don't see that group coming to the rescue, but I see a new generation who are trying to rise up. They're getting educated. They are learning what you and I are talking about. They're feeding on what we're talking about, what others are talking about. They're learning what the Constitution, there are people now that are teaching the Constitution, teaching the law, and they're going, I need to learn this so they can take their position. There you go.
Let's compare the Constitution to the Holy Bible. Right? One is to defend your country. The other one is to go live in the afterlife, but live well in this life spiritually, right? To come into the grace of God. So they're two different books, but this is based off the Bible.
Yes, it is.
Wasn't created out of thin air.
And as I said, they took Roger Williams' teaching and applied it. That's where we have the freedom of speech, the freedom to meet. So my question is, my thought is, with this epiphany of the older generation dying off, those older generation, and we're talking people in their 80s, 90s, that are still in control of the banking system, in control of the power grid of the world. Talk to me about how you see them being removed and a new generation coming along that's going to allow the transformation to take place.
Sure. So we're on the 12th of January again, just reminding the people. So we're not even 2 weeks into the new year, and we've had something close to 100 resignations of like JetBlue and other major corporations. We had Prince William abdicating; he's never going to take the throne. We had the Queen of Denmark saying her son's never going to take the throne. This is all news because the release of the Epstein client list, because they're all involved somehow in human trafficking, whether they directly in Epstein, whatever, but they've all involved and they've all resigned and quit. There's a list out there on Twitter. They're updating it every day. So people are resigning. So to your question is, the old guard is removing themselves because they got caught. The punishment is military tribunals. They know this. They're stepping aside. This is happening. You go back to September 2018, Trump's executive order was one on the election overthrow, but the other one goes back to December 21st or 20th of 2017, that was the one on human trafficking. Anyone caught anywhere in the world, that's how you know there's a military alliance, people. It is not just the United States. It is not just domestic. It's anywhere in the world. You will have your assets frozen. You will be dealt with. They've been not only dismantling the military, like you're saying, which is freaking out some service members I know, and that's a great observation, but they're dismantling the financial system and they're replacing it. So if you go to usdebtclock.org,
Yep.
now you're just going to, you see all the numbers, but in the bottom right, you'll see some strange numbers. Let me go take a look at what's showing there in the bottom right this minute. And you're just incredible. You're looking at dollars and silver to dollar supply. It's worth zero in the corporation of this Federal Reserve. I mean, you just look at some very bizarre numbers there. And then there might be a thing on bricks, which shows a very high number. And it's just incredible. But what they've been doing is they've been putting memes up on the us.clock.org frequently. They had Ponzi scheme up there. They've had something yesterday. They quote Jesus Christ on the debt clock. And so no one knows who set the debt clock in 2008, but we clearly know now that the White Hats are in full control of the U.S. debt clock. And the numbers are bizarre. The money supply is shrinking. They're going to crash the system. It's coming.
So if you look at the World Economic, or I mean the Economist magazine, I was just looking at the November issue, which is always foretelling what's going to happen in the future. I mean, look, if you looked at the November 2019, I've got it in my book. It told you what was going to happen. It has everything. I mean, it's all there right in front of your face that we're going to launch this. We got the mask over the corona on the little horseman. They told you ahead of time, we're going to pull this thing off. And we're going to go I mean, it was all interesting. Now you're looking at it and you've got phases of the moon. You've got these red, blue coming together. You've got interesting things. And I was listening to somebody's doing a little analysis and I'm like, boy, I see. Yes, they're trying to, they're giving you these notices. This is what I've learned is, James, they give you a notice. They have to tell you ahead of time.
Yeah, they do.
Like when
it's called deliverance of method.
Deliverance of method, and I call it a notice of just like when your city wants to build somebody wants to build a apartment complex where a house is, you will see this placard. It will be a billboard, a little small thing, and it'll say notice of intention. And you go over there, and it's got a bunch of legal jargon, and it'll say what they want to do. And then you've got X amount of time, usually 6 months. These things sit there for a long time. And you could take a picture of that. You can go down to the city and say, I don't like this idea. I don't want this. And now you've got the ability. But if you don't do anything, at the time that sign comes down, it's a done deal. You can't say, hey, I don't want that apart. Look, we gave you notice. So it's an offer. Everything these guys do is an offer. It's legal. They have to give you legal notice because they operate on this great, big, huge legal process.
It's part of our free will, though. Again,
and it's an offer. It's free will.
Right. Satan can't touch our free will. As a universal law, God created it.
Satan didn't.
But Satan can make an offer, and you can like make a real bad choice, and like I'll throw out my free will. Like I'll go do this. Remember what Jesus says, get behind me, Satan, 3 temptations. And he said, no.
Satan didn't tie Jesus' hands behind and put a gun to his head. He didn't take Adam and Eve and throw them and tie them down and take a rock. He never does that. Even when you read the book of Job, he goes before God and says, do I have permission? And so the great delusion that takes place here on this world, the minions have asked God for permission. And Jesus even says, I think there's a place where it says, Satan has asked for permission to sift you like wheat, but he's not going to destroy you, but he's going to sift you. He's going to test you. This world that we live in is 2 things. One, it's a testing ground. Are you going to choose God? Or are you going to choose something else? And number 2, are you going to live out what I've called you to live out so that you can create the world that I want you to create to make paradise. But it's a choice. And
It is a choice. The Bible, I was told this by Steve Thomas, who's got like the tallest cross in near Armadillo, Texas, out in the Panhandle there. He told me when I went to see him in Florida last year, he said Bible stands for basic information before you leave Earth. That's what it stands for.
well, speaking of basic information, I wanted to talk a little bit about your book. Tell me a little bit about the CDC, if you can.
Now, before I get to CDC, I want to just plug Dolphin Drone. I know it's a novel, but why do I want to plug a book that was written in 2016?
What's it called? Dolphin?
Dolphin, like the animal dolphin drone.
Yes, please.
So U.S. Navy has a big marine mammal program. They still do. So I have like sort of a Tom Clancy book with the main character being a dolphin whisperer, former Navy SEAL, and he's got two dolphins to help help take down some terrorist activity and stuff like that. So why am I bringing that up? Well, because one of my opening scenes in the book, like probably chapter 4 or 5, is a shipping hijacked in Aden and the Red Sea with Yemen involved. Just saying. So I'm plugging that book, people.
Okay, and it's a novel.
It's a novel. So, but it's very well researched, because if you're doing a Tom Clancy kind of book, or doing a historical novel, or even a book in the Bible, it doesn't come out of thin air, right? You do a lot of research. You want the ship to be accurate. You want the boarding process to be accurate. All of this stuff. So that book is very well researched, and it's kind of a fun read. So that's why I'm plugging that.
And James, you do write your own books, right?
Oh yeah.
Unlike Tom Clancy, which we discovered had everything ghostwritten for him.
Yeah, well, that's called the CIA. Another operation. Stephen King's an operation, people. He never wrote the volume of work he ever did. CIA, Communist in Action. That's who wrote it for. He had a team.
I have learned that a lot of I've known that every celebrity book is not written by that celebrity.
Is J.K. Dowling? I can't say she is or isn't, but you need question marks over certain special ones that put out a lot of books and a lot of detail. You have to wonder, can they really be that prodigious? I published my 3 books in 1 year. That's because I inherited money. I didn't work for a living, right? And I could spend the entire year of getting, but I had runways. Manuscripts were done long before I got to the year. Then it was all about dealing with 3 different editors and publishing. So I published the CDC book, Massive Manipulator, in May of 2016 with Skyhorse Publishing. And what was interesting about the book, if you know the movie Vaxxed, that was about the domestic fraud of the CDC in the early 2000s, trying to erase the autism signal from vaccines. My book, Massive Manipulator, was the international fraud. So it's the twin of the Vax. It's called Massive Manipulator. It's about a CDC hired a Danish scientist to use Denmark's health registry, which has got all the health records of every person born in Denmark from 1968 on. So they thought the perfect database to go show vaccines were safe. Oh, they had bad signals. They went back and manipulated the data, right? And then the Danish scientist, Paul Thorsten, who they hired, guess what? He wasn't the brightest light bulb in the world, but he knew how to sleep with Diana Schendel, a top-level scientist at the CDC, literally had an affair, was able to get, what do you call, like CDC letterhead, and then was able to his university to create an invoice demanding money from the CDC, went to the university, used a second invoice, and then the university paid the CDC bank account, which was in his name. The CDC had 3 credit unions. So he ends up buying a Harley Davidson Fat Boy, $38,000 in 2006. He bought a $550,000 house in 2005, beautiful 4-bedroom house right outside the CDC, not far from Druid Hills. So the FBI got involved in the Department of Justice, and there's still a 22-count indictment against them for stealing more than $1 million. So the scientist that was supposed to give you data fraud and did, right, delivered, he also said, well, he was financial fraud. And so there's still an open, warrant for his arrest in the United States. And the CDC makes sure they keep him away because they sent Diana Schendel in the middle of last decade to keep an eye on him, to make sure he wasn't doing anything stupid, right? And I ended up doing a book on him, and it was kind of the fun tale because I exposed a lot of the corruption. So there was Paul Thorson, the bad guy. It was his girlfriend, the semi-bad guy or bad girl. And then in the middle, we had a young 29-year-old PhD student, Christine Madsen, who was a candidate, wasn't a PhD yet, because part of his thesis were these papers on MMR and you know, and autism vaccines are safe, and thimerosal and vaccines are safe, right? And so I went over there like a true Viking battering ram, and I stayed in Copenhagen for 5 days, and I got a hold of Matt. I got a hold of their emails, all of them. So I sent an email to Paul Thorson's lawyer. His lawyer responds, "I will neither confirm nor deny I work for Paul Thorson." Okay, knock yourself out. Dinah Shendel basically urinated in her pants because I went up to the Aarhus University. I found her office, took pictures of, you know, her nameplate, her mailbox, right? I slipped my business card. I missed her by 10 minutes on a Friday afternoon, but I slipped my business card under her door. So she got it. So eventually she got the dean of health at the time to reach out to me, and they say, "Well, you need to answer some questions, or you're gonna hide and lie." Right. Well, he says, "Well, in July," which is true because I'm Norwegian, I know this. All of Scandinavia and Northern Europe shuts down in July for summer holiday. In South Europe, August, all those countries shut down in August. It's too hot, right? So we got a lot of tourism going back and forth. So they wouldn't answer to August, but I emailed the Dean of English, CC Diana Shendel, and got answers. But Christian Madsen, I just basically threatened him. I said, "You know what I'm going to do to you? I'm going to make you as famous as Paul Thorson. You know, as a complete criminal, as a conspirator and all this, I'm going to make you a fucking rock star." Why? One, I'm Norwegian, and my middle name's Otar, right? So, boom, he understood, right? I said, "Oh, my mom's from a very wealthy shipping family. I have no problem getting access to any private investigators I want." I just laid it all out you know what? He waited, because I told him the dates I was there. He didn't want to meet me, obviously, but he waited 2 weeks, and then he decided to reach out to me. He talked to me for an hour. It was an amicable, because I realized he wasn't part of the stuff. Did he go back and was some data manipulated? Yeah, but I think more of the data was manipulated on the CDC side than his side at the end of the day. And it was pretty interesting. So the one who was in control of all this was Dr. Colleen Boyle. And wouldn't you know, she sat as a private investigator on what? On the Agent Orange cover-up studies that Congress put out from 1984 to 1989 under the Reagan administration. But guess what? They quit the study 2 years early. Now, why would you quit a study that Congress has given you $71 million, a lot of money in the 1980s, $71 million to do 4 studies on Agent Orange and injuring 38 kinds of acute cancer, right? And maiming, 500,000 US veterans. Why would you do that and quit early?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they left 20 million on the table. They spent 50 million, but they never spent the last 20 million. And well, lo and behold, so she not only, you can see how corrupt the CDC, she got promoted. In the real private, in the private world, you'd be fired. You didn't finish your project, you're fired, you're gone, right? You're a complete loser. But she was following orders from somebody. And so she eventually recruited Dinah Shendel in 1992. So Shendel was from day one, and then she became the cleanup person, and there's a deal with the devil again. So Bill Clinton in 2000 set up the NCB D, National Committee on Birth Defects and Disabilities, whatever it stands for. It's a very long 6-letter acronym. But Clinton set this up because they had a lot of birth defects and they had a lot of autism in babies. And so they had to go deal with this. So she wasn't the first director there, but she was promised, obviously, to become the next director. She did, I think, in around 2010, 11 or so. And then she retired on January 2020, right when COVID out, because she didn't want to be any part of it anymore. But Congress had her in the mid-2000s, and they squeezed her balls saying, answer this about vaccines. And she sat there for like 3 minutes of silence. She refused to answer questions. Right. It was because they nailed her. And that was with Congressman at the time, Bill Posey out of Florida. So it's a fascinating story. And apparently Dinah Shendel is now employed at Drexel University up in Philadelphia, what I've been told. Right. And Thorson actually was an adjunct professor. So, there's a contact, CDC calls these universities and takes some of their former employees, right? Again, making a deal that you're silenced and here's your job, here's your pension, right? This is how they work. So the devil offering happens inside our own governments for all the corruption. This is how they keep the scientists quiet. They pay them off. Very few whistleblowers. And when whistleblowers shown up, as we've seen in the past 4 years, some get killed. Just a fact of life.
You know, it reminds me of the hierarchy of many a church denomination. Specifically, we saw that within the Catholic structure of pedophile priests. They keep getting moved from one parish to the next, to the next,
Yeah.
to the next. And that same thing.
Hopscotch.
What's that?
Hopscotch, a little kid game.
Yep.
Just hopping around.
Hopping around. And they do the same thing with these. And let's be honest, CEOs can screw up a company, and then they get moved over to another company, and then they get moved over to another company,
And sit on multiple boards.
and they just do this. I saw that way back. I worked for a company here locally back in the 90s, healthcare insurance company.
Because they follow orders, and they're all doing DEI now, all of them.
Yeah, they sit on each other's boards and they get hired for each other's companies. That's
They
how.
cover each other's backs and butts and all that fun stuff. That's really what happens.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with it. Speaking of CDC, I was going to look for. I got a DVD that comes from the CDC. My wife's a nurse practitioner, so she's in the world of medicine, and she's had 2020 was a huge wake up call for her, and so she's completely transformed her thinking. But every year they all get their flu boosters, their flu shots, and I never did. And now my wife's suffering from some things. And I said, and she has accepted the fact that probably
flu shots now are mRNA, people. It is absolutely the same thing as the COVID shot. There's no difference now. I'm telling you, this is what they're doing. The RSV will be the same. They're coming after your children. So if you think I'm going to go get a flu shot for my kid, it's no longer the flu shot you knew at all.
no.
It's now the bioweapon. They're trying to vaccinate as many people as they can before the market crashes. The people who've been poisoned actually shocked awake. When they wake up, they're not going for 5 stages of grief. They're going for a reckoning. They'll be looking for people.
I hope so. I know somebody at my club who they're Vietnamese. He's Vietnamese, young, stout guy, and I talked with him. This is after they opened up the club, and you could go back in without wearing masks because I just refused to go until they said no more masks. His brother, and his son all had terrible. One of them got the palsy. Another one had a heart issue, almost died, and he had terrible back issues. Now I think they've all recovered, but they were Taiwan. It was like they really got hit hard, and they're just local here in the Northwest. But back to the CDC, they are actually a corporation. They're not even the government.
They're a foreign corporation, and I call them the COVID death cult. Why do I do that? Well, you're really based in Druid Hills. Hello. They're not in Atlanta. They're in Druid Hills, a suburb outside Atlanta. They're in Druid Hills. They're 1 mile down the street from Emory University. They are a death cult. There's nothing more to say, nothing less. Even the NIH, you go look at the NIH logo. It looks like a hangar, but it's got three hangars in one. Why? Because it's showing you the Osiris Eye 3 times.
Yeah.
6, 6, 6. This is in our face. The HHS has really got some Satanists running the Department of Human Health and Services. If the people knew this, right, worldly governments being corrupt, dark, and evil, if they knew this, you think any of our tax money should ever go to any of our health departments again? No.
I'm glad you brought that up about symbology. Have you been watching? I put this into my notes, but you and I talked a little bit about this, and I'll bring it up here in a moment. But have you visited Washington, D.C.?
Oh, of course, many times. My third book, Breaking Van Gogh. I spent a day at the National Museum there because I had archived one of the Van Gogh shows from 1990. So I spent the full day there. I've gone there on press junkets for the Huffington Post when I was covering Bloomberg events and things like that. And of course, I went to the reopening of the White House. I lived in Philadelphia at the time, so I got up at 4 in the morning, drove down there, got in line at 7 in the morning. Highways were empty. It was Saturday morning, and it was George Bush, H.W. Bush, and it was like the temperature was like 20 degrees. And I was in this line, went around the White House. By the time I got into the White House through security, it was 11 a.m. And this was 1989, January 20th of 1989. I ended up meeting Jeb Bush down in the basement, shook his hand, and left. So I went to the White House at one time. It was pretty interesting.
Well, what I noticed, we went back there in 2019, my family, and spent a couple days just wandering all the monuments and everything. I said, is this Rome? This is like Rome being transported out of Greece
Oh, yeah.
to the United States. And I went, and I had already been on my rabbit trail. And I was like, every symbol there is a symbol of empire, the Roman Empire. And I realized,
yes, and even if you get the sky view, right? You get the Google Earth and you look down at it, you see the pentagram. You see it.
it's right in our face. It's
Totally.
it's
And if you
everywhere.
take the word, Josh Reed talked about this last week when I did a show with him. Take the word Mary, land, drop land, you got Mary, and take Virginia and take out the IA, you got Virgin Mary. And you have what? You have the Potomac River creating a vagina.
Yes.
Between right, the Potomac, right between the maritime port and this and that. And it aligns with one of the star constellations, no less. And this is just how encoded these cabal agents are. They're the Illuminati. They're slavish to numbers. They love symbology. It allows them to code in the open. And so eventually we'd learn that 33 is a word they use often in the newspapers.
Yes.
How they code to each other. What does 33 mean? Is often a hoax. So if you think about 9/11, it was 9 divided by a square root of 9 is 3 times 11 is 33. So what happened when the World Health Organization declared a pandemic in 2020? Well, they could have called it at the end of January. It was based on their own definition, 8 steps to get to a pandemic. It was already happening, right? 2 deaths in the country, this and that, all whatever. There were 8 steps. They could have done it. No, they waited to March 11th, 3 times 11 on purpose. There was another psyop. They waited.
Yes.
Trump then played a game. He could have declared the national emergency on Thursday the 14th. Did he do it? I mean, Thursday the 12th, right? 11/12. No, he waited to Friday the 13th, 2020 to declare a national emergency. Kind of a middle finger back to the Illuminati. That was the same day that Bill Gates resigned as chairman of the board of Microsoft. Same exact day. No accident.
I find it's really interesting because I mean, you've got Washington Monument, which is nothing but a phallic symbol.
Right? It's Osiris or Baal shaft. It's
Or
whatever.
Sire.
Right? It's pagan.
It's pagan. So when we're talking about this, I started looking up the god Mercury. And Mercury is, we all think about him as the speed, Mercury, comet, whatever. But actually, it's the god of commerce and the god of medicine, because if you look at, he's
Makes a
holding
lot more sense.
he's holding that symbol with the little cross with the 2 serpents going up.
Yeah.
And that's
The
what-
wings.
and the
And
wings.
the wings.
Well, Mercury.
Mercury has the wings on his Achilles heel.
So you've got a lot of things going, and then Mercury was used in one of the first quote spaceships, and then Mercury is one of the ingredients of all vaccines. It's poisonous,
Yeah, it's all poison.
and then you realize, holy smokes, this is a god that is being used, and then you realize every NASA program, every name is all around gods. What's that? Apollo.
Apollo.
Columbus. The Columbus District of Columbus. Columbus is a goddess.
Yep.
So when you start going down this road, you realize that we have a lot of paganism that is based our country, not the founding fathers, but the guys that took over from that point on. They brought
Right.
in this paganism, and it's evident. And what's interesting is you and I even were talking about when you and I were setting this show up. Take a look at Colossus of Rhodes, which guarded the harbor,
Eastern Mediterranean.
and then you look at the Statue of Liberty. They're one and the same.
Totally.
It's
And the Statue of Liberty could go a little further because Lucifer is androgynous. So if you look at, it's a woman, but look at the jawline of Liberty. Look at the
It's
big
not a
kind of
woman.
legs and shoulders. It's also be taken from a distance a man.
Yes. Yes, and the more you look at the face, the more you all see that Romanesque nose,
Yeah.
that very narrow, too broad to me for a female. They gussied it up with Lady Liberty later on in the coinage, but the torch also, because he's called the light bringer,
Yep.
but he's the false light bringer. So I find that this is we can go on and on. And I'm going to run out of time. Before I do, I want to just shift real quick and let you talk to me about your Van Gogh. It's called Chasing.
Breaking Van Gogh, the $95 million fake at the Metropolitan Museum. Something that second thing. Before I do, I want to invite you onto my other show I do. It's called Beyond the Bible. I have a co-host on that show. She's really good as far as scripture. I'd like to invite you, so I'm going to let you know. I'll email you next week, and we'll figure out a day that works for you, a day and time.
Perfect. I appreciate that.
Yeah, so Breaking Van Gogh. So in 2013, there were a bunch of fake Jackson Pollocks going on in New York City. And I was writing for the Huffington Post. I ended up covering that story. And I went to an art expert named Robert Alexander. And his father used to write for Sports Illustrated, Phil Stream back in the 60s. But his son, Robert, what I call Alex Boyle, Boyle. Alex Wood, and his father was Robert Boyle. And his father, Robert Boyle, by the way, founded River Keepers, and then eventually got Robert F. Kennedy Jr. off the heroin addiction in 1983.
Oh.
Small story. So his son, Alex, who's through a friend of mine, lived near my hometown. So we met several times. He became the art expert for me, because I'm not an art expert. I'm an art lover, but not an expert, on why these pots were fake and who were behind and all that. So I wrote that article. So he asked me if I had one more question. And this one more question became the book, Breaking Van Gogh. I said, is there a fake Van Gogh out there? Because I'm a big Van Gogh fan. He started laughing. What are you laughing for? He goes, no, there's a fake Van Gogh. There's always plenty of fake Van Goghs. He goes, he said one thing that stuck with me. You can't, forging artists' work can only be done when they're physically off the earth, right? When they're dead.
Dead.
Only then can they sort of get away with it. He said there's a fake at the Metropolitan Museum. I live in the Upper East Side. It was a 10-minute walk to the Metropolitan Museum. I go, are you kidding? I go, get out of here. My reaction. So he went the next day, took a picture of the wheat field with cypresses, high definition camera, sent it to me. He goes, now take a look at it. Sends me the London, the London National Gallery, which had there's three versions of the wheat field cypress, but the one in the Met is a Fugazi. Most interesting part about what I would learn is it was Van Gogh's greatest works were not only at the end of his life, it was also when he self-checked in as a level 3 or 4 semi-psychotic, when he cut off his ear and he went to the asylum. He went to the asylum to get away from everything. And he ended up painting and painting and painting. Did Starry Night, did all these amazing paintings. A vertical cypress. So then I had access to something that people research would have loved in the 1980s, but Van Gogh letter database online. So it was Joe Bonger, which was the widow of Theo, the older brother of Vincent, who ran the gallery. She translated by hand like 1,000+ letters between Vincent, Theo, Vincent, Paul Cézanne, Monet, and all these and buyers and things, all sorts of stuff. She does it in her French language, Dutch language first. She does it in French. She does it in German. She does it in English. Took her 25 years.
Wow.
The Van Gogh Museum keeps this online, the Van Gogh letter database. You can go in there, and what's amazing, I don't have to read through 1,000 letters. I can say, wheat fill, and I'd get like 30 letters. Van Gogh's death, I get 10 letters, right? It would be one after another. So it cut down the research time. I never had to leave my house. I could do it 24/7. It was an amazing journey. And I learned when I started using the database that there was no letter about this one painting in the Met, which the Met claimed was in June of that year. But there was a cypress. It was vertical, not horizontal, like the painting. And so I said, that's really weird. And you look at the detail in one room at the Annenberg wing in the Metropolitan, but then you go look at the Wheatfield of Cypresses, they're done by two different artists. You don't have to be an expert. You can see the brushstrokes in one is an absolute masterpiece. The other one's like, And the other one had one thing interesting. So this is where Alex Boyle had a very unique perception. When Vincent was down in Saint Remy at the Asylum, his brother Theo had the art house up in Paris. So you put it onto a rickety train, right? And Vince was always a poor artist, so he never had a lot of money. But when he did, he'd take like 10 of his paintings each month, stack them on top of each other, roll them up, throw them into a tube or crate, and it goes up there.
You get that rubbing like this.
Yes, and Vincent wasn't watercolors. It was thick oil-based paint. It had thick impacted impasto, it's called. And it's three-dimensional. It comes right off the canvas. It's absolutely amazing. So the London Museum National Gallery did a 1987 study, did a complete forensic X-ray, every UV light, everything in the world on their version. And they published a 20-page report. The Met never did anything like that. In fact, the Met wouldn't even give me the condition report. The condition report is the audit trail, like blockchain, on paper, from the day the painting was painted all the way to the present. Every time it went on tour, the condition report gets updated, right? Every time it leaves the museum, every time there's a new buyer, this is the blockchain audit. Never, they refused to give it to me, even though they're a public institution. They said, no, we're not public. Well, you're 1860 charter, you're public, right? And it was, so I knew then that was a red flag that they wouldn't give up something as basic as that. I then eventually went back and looked at 1901. It was the first Van Gogh retrospective exhibit and what happened in 1901. 73 Van Gogh paintings were exhibited for the first time ever because he became popular 11 years after his death, right? Very popular. Well, they identified two Fugazis immediately, and they took them out. Well, Emil Schuffenecker was a friend of Vincent back then, but he painted, he was a third level impressionist. He was never in the Van Gogh class, Monet class. He wasn't even in the B, he was in the C class. And what was interesting, he did a total of like maybe 90 some paintings in his life, but he only did one from 1900 to he died 34 years later. And he did them all before that. Why? Well, he was in a banking industry and stuff like that. Because what was he doing? He was making more money copying Vincent and maybe some others, right? And it wasn't frowned upon as much as it is today, right? They're called copyists back in the day for a reason, right? There was no Xerox machine. There was nothing to.
Yeah, you couldn't make a serigraph or something. You couldn't make.
No, there was not even cameras weren't good enough to pull it out.
No.
So they did this. So he forged it, but he forged it in 1901. So the provenance doesn't come from 1890 to 1901. It begins with one Wheatfield of Cypress going in and two coming out. And what ends up being amazing is the Fugazi, the fake Van Gogh. And my recommendation is you keep it on the wall. Why? Because students should learn what a bad looking Van Gogh it is. Because the cracking of painting, right, rolling up, shows up in cracks in other Van Gogh works. But this one painting, it was never rolled. It looks newer than the other Van Gogh paintings from the same. And so it becomes obvious that is not his brushstroke. It has no crack and no defects, no rapid aging that when Van Gogh stuck it together. So this became the smoking gun. It's extraordinary. And what's great about the painting that ended up in the Met is the 100-year history of three dynastic families. The von Mendelssohns, which is Felix Mendelssohn, the great composer from the 19th century. These are his. Moses Mendelssohn was a very famous Jewish philosopher in Germany back in 1795, right? They created a school there in Germany today, and I was able to 10 years ago, I was able to talk to Julius Sheps, who was an heir of the von Mendelssohn family. He told me all about the history. So the von Mendelssohns were the biggest Jewish bankers in all of Germany, private banks in all of Germany. What did Hitler do in 1935? 1935, he Aryanization, right? They kicked out any Jewish people out of all board seats, out of all companies, right? Out of banks and everything. And then when they realized they had paintings, they ended up stealing, 10, 20 paintings or whatever. And what Julius Sheps told me was interesting. He goes, really strange, James. Really strange. And I go, what's that? He goes, they had 12 paintings before World War II of Van Gogh only. They had others. They had probably 100 plus paintings, but they had 12 of Van Gogh. And after the war, four disappeared. He just weird. And what was interesting is the family members, right? One Carl von Mendelssohn and the brother, I forgot his name. One had a heart attack that year. The other one would die that following year because they died of what? Their life's work being destroyed, the stress it brought on them, right? The heart attacks, whatever, they died.
Yep.
But the children and the nephews and nieces took whatever paintings they could. They went down to a farm on the Swiss border and they hid them inside hay, wherever else. And it survived. After the war, all of Europe was bankrupt except one guy. Emil Berla. He was the biggest arms dealer in all of the world back in World War II.
Yeah, rich guy.
Super rich. The richest man in Europe, he was called, actually.
Wow.
56. So Peter Witt worked at the CIA, no less. And he was one of the heirs to the family. Peter Witt actually took the paintings and sold that one particular painting, the Fugazi, right, the Sweet for Cyprus, to Emil G. Burley, and because they were bankrupt in 1951, he did it. Burley would die 5 years later, in 1956. His two children, Hortense, a woman, and his son Dieter would carry on the weapons, but they also had like 180 paintings and artwork that were classic, impressionist, right? Compared to the Vandenbergs, which had 52. Vandenberg sees it in a 1990 retrospective, right, of Vandenberg and their paintings, and is blown away by the collection by the Burleys. And what was amazing, I got all of the information. I got all the information about the tour, the press. I got all everything. So I was able to piece that all back together. I got photographs of where the painting actually hung, and I got all of it. It was amazing. Van Gogh Walter Annenberg, who was a scumbag of a human being, Republican, worked as an ambassador in London under Nixon in the late 60s, owned TV Guide, which was very famous in the 60s, 70s, long before, right? And he owned Philadelphia Inquirer, and he used to assassinate Republican Democrats, character assassination is what he used to do. And his father was also named Moses Annenberg, and he was part of the Chicago mob back in the 1930s. So you see the bloodline here.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So you said you have the good Jewish family, the von Mendelssohn, the creative people, and you have the Annenbergs, which are scumbags. And he would buy the Van Gogh painting for $57 million, right? And if it was real, it'd be worth $95 million by the time I published this book, right? This is where it was. But he had all of his paintings in Sunnyland, his beautiful, custom designed Palm Beach, California, or Palm Springs. Beautiful ranch house, high end. He used to have George Bush in there. He had many diplomats, many presidents from around the world come in and have dinner with him and his wife, Sunny. That's why it's called Sunnylands. And what was interesting about Walter is he had 52 paintings there, but he left them in his house till he died in 2002. But for some reason, he donated that one painting to the Met in 93. with the promise of the Met saying, yeah, we'll take care of all your paintings and have the Annenberg wing. And that's how that happened. And so you realize you got to be kidding. So he had buyer's remorse. Somebody Somebody, you know, thought they had a real painting. Eventually, they took a real look at it and realized, holy man, that's not real. So so Breaking Van Gogh is a really good story in the sense that it captures the American history, European history over a 100-year period, and captures 3 dynastic families. And it covers, it was a big portion, obviously, to Vincent and his paintings and artwork and stuff. And I have a different perspective than other people do. And just the way it turned out. And so the Met still has a painting. They can never put it on an exhibition anywhere. They can never sell it because the Fugazi would be caught. And I say, you know what? People need to see what a fake looks like. But they'll never take the vertical cypresses painting that was actually painted in mid-June of 1889 versus the cypresses, because you look at that, there's 2 different brushstrokes. They're not even close.
I went to art school for a couple of years in hopes of being in advertising, and I used to get into that, used to do a lot of painting and artwork, and I still do a little graphics. But yeah, I remember studying the Impressionists, and if you're looking at somebody's work and you put them side by side, that's when you can compare them. You can definitely, if they're in a different room, your mind is going to play tricks. But if you put them right next to each other, you're going to go, that's not the same person, because every artist has their own unique signature about them. I don't care who it is.
Correct.
You can tell a Thomas Kincaid from a fake Thomas Kincaid. You can tell them from a, like you said, any of these guys.
Even us writers.
Oh, yes.
Style.
When somebody reads my writing and I write articles, a friend of mine said, it's just like your book, Steve. It's just like you talk. And I go, well, it's who I am.
It's me, right? You write your style, I write my style. That's why AI is gonna destroy plagiarism. There'll be no they won't have a chance, plagiarism in institutions. In fact, I think a lot more people will be resigning once all this gets out, right? Why would we go to an institution of higher learning if you're all a bunch of criminals, you bunch of frauds?
I think you're right. I think the fact is, if people want to purchase AI-driven novels or AI-driven garbage,
Just call it what it is.
it is what it is. But when you read me or read you, you read a human being. And with that, I just want to say thanks, James. Before we leave, where can people find you?
Sure. So my shows, go to rumble.com/Red Pill Project, singular, Red Pill Project. And our new website is not up yet, but we'll have an announcement there soon in February called decentralized.media. Decentralized.media. So the name right behind me.
Decentralized.
.media. We'll have announcements there. We're
Media.
coming around the mountain.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to say thank you so much for joining me. And thanks, guys, for listening in to me. And until next time, I want to remind you, be a lion and not the prey.
Yeah, be a lion. I agree. Thanks, Steve. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.